Hey, welcome back, new cadets. Captain Colburn here, bringing you the last lesson in this summer orientation video series. And today we're going to talk a little bit about life in the Air Force. So if you're interested in the Air Force ROTC, you're probably thinking that obviously you want a career in the military, whether it's for a few years or a whole 20+ year career. So today we're just going to discuss different aspects of being in the Air Force, service obligation, different types of career fields that you might want to pursue. What does life on an Air Force base even look like? That kind of stuff. So if you have any questions when you get to the detachment, don't hesitate to ask me. Lieutenant Colonel Harrop is our new detachment commander, so he'll be available, or Major Lindsay Philibom. We're all here to talk to you about what it's like to be an active duty Air Force officer. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go through the presentation and show you guys some good information, I hope, if this starts wanting to work. Okay, so active duty life in the Air Force, what does it look like? So here's just some stuff that we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss different career fields. What are the service commitments or the service obligations look like? How many years would you be obligated to the Air Force, and when would that take effect? The different duty locations, so the different Air Force bases around the world that you could be stationed at. Pay and benefits, life on base, to include what is on an Air Force installation that you can use, and recreation options, and how often do you move, and finally we'll wrap it up with career and promotion questions. Okay, so Air Force career fields. So we have many different categories of career fields in the United States Air Force. Some of the most popular when you think of the Air Force are what we call the rated career fields. So these include your pilots, your remote aircraft pilots, combat systems officers, and air battle managers. And now all of those are flying career fields, right? They're in an aircraft or around aircraft. So when you're thinking about your ROTC career and going for different opportunities, if you see rated on it, that means it has something to do with flying. And non-rated, pretty much everything else. So all of your non-flying career fields. So engineering, intelligence, cyber warfare, finance, personnel, logistics, airfield ops, missile ops, and so many more. That's only just a short list of what we have in the Air Force that falls under that non-rated category. Now behind each one of those, I have line officers written. And what line officer means is that you, as a line officer, which is both rated and non-rated career fields, you hold a general authority to command. Okay, so what that means is a little bit different than if you drop down and we're looking at our specialty and professional career fields, such as the medical corps, chaplains, and your lawyers, which are in the JAG Corps. They're not line officers, so they will command within their own specialized fields. But your line officers, which are, again, the rated and non-rated fields, they have the ability to command technically any of those career fields. So occasionally you'll see a pilot who's further along in his career that might be in charge of, a different career field. As a personnel officer, I might potentially be in charge one day of a contracting unit or something else like that. So there is some flexibility in your ability to command another career field. That's not typical, but what line officer means is that you have that general command authority. Okay, and your specialty career fields down there require special schooling, as you might imagine. So your medical corps, doctors, nurses, other specialists within the medical field, social workers, psychiatrists, and whatnot, obviously require that specialized schooling. You have to have a law degree and pass the bar in order to be in the JAG Corps, and the chaplains have specialized schooling as well. So those are all very unique career fields on their own. And you might be thinking, okay, well, based on my career, your different degree program that you might be interested in, where might you land in the Air Force? So lots of different possibilities, and just because you have a certain type of degree doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow one of these career fields in these blocks. This is just a kind of a loose collection of where you might want to start looking. Again, and this is not all of the officer career fields that we have, it's just a relatively short list. So something along the lines of business, finance, human resources, that kind of stuff. You could look into acquisitions, which is a very, very unique career field. And the cool thing about acquisitions is that you could spend a tour learning how to be an intel officer, right? So intelligence, you can get that training and go spend 4 years being an intelligence officer, and then come back and work your actual acquisition job. And what acquisitions is getting the equipment or the software, or whatever it is that that community needs to get the mission done. So acquisition is pretty cool. Contracting, very useful on the outside if you're looking to do a few years in the Air Force and then go out into the civilian world. Force support is my career field, and that is a pretty broad collection of personnel, so like your human resources type activities, all of your support activities like our lodging, fitness, dining services, that kind of stuff, deployment operations, and a whole lot more falls under force support. And financial management, we do have different comptroller units around the Air Force to make sure we're staying on budget and we're using our money appropriately. Liberal arts, management type degrees, or really any degree. You can get into airfield operations, so that's the management of runways and airfields, missile ops. Lieutenant Colonel Harrop will be able to tell you about that. He's my ICBM guy. And you could be in charge of, safeguarding the nation's nuclear weapons one day. You never know. We also have intelligence officers that can be from a bunch of different career fields, but first, again, an example of some of the degrees that they require or they look for are language degrees, international studies degrees, and whatnot. So computer science, information communication majors, you might want to look at our cyberspace operations career field and think cyber warfare, right? And in addition to the cyber warfare side, you also have the offensive side of cyber warfare and the defensive side of it. Our cyberspace guys also manage our communications networks, which, because we operate around the world, are incredibly important. So public affairs, it's a very small career field, but it's incredibly important because each Air Force base has a public affairs unit, and they handle all of the communications outside the base, whether there's an exercise going on. They're the media representative. So they are very adept at crafting messages for the news, local news agencies, working with local news agencies, and whatnot. So public affairs, very small, but incredibly important. And for our technical degrees, we have space operations. So if you want to oversee satellites, rocket launches, that kind of stuff, great opportunity there. Scientists and weather. Our weather folks are incredibly important in the Air Force because so much of what we do revolves around flying aircraft around the world. And if we don't know what's going on with the weather, we can't fly. So we have a very large group of weathermen and support staff all around the world who make sure that we are cleared to go where we need to go. Logistics and supply chain management, aircraft maintenance. So again, if the jet's broken, it can't fly. So keeping our jets fixed and ready to go, vital to making sure that we're doing what we need to do around the world. Same thing with our munitions. So the munitions are the weapons. So you need to make sure the weapons are good to go in case we have to use them. We don't want to have to use them, but want to make sure if the call is there to do it, that those are ready to go. And logistics readiness is another really large career field that is everything from base transportation, making sure that there are vehicles going around the base, picking people up, dropping them off where they need to be, to deployment operations, to anything and everything. So if it involves moving equipment or moving people, it falls under logistics. And it's a huge field, again, incredibly important to what we do in the Air Force. Criminal justice degrees might want to look at doing security forces. So those are the military police in the Air Force. And they have many different roles in the Air Force. It's not just law enforcement. They will do law enforcement on each base, but they'll also make sure they're protecting the flight line and protecting all the aircraft that are coming and going. If you have really important people like in DC, so like the president's plane and all those really important state officials, when they fly around the world, they'll have folks that are special security forces members who fly with them to make sure that they're secure. So nuclear operations as well, they'll secure all the nuclear launch facilities around the US. So they do a lot. And again, if you're looking at all into law enforcement and want that plus all the other options that you get with security forces, it's a great career field. OSI is the Office of Special Investigations. And if you love NCIS, the TV show, you would probably be interested in OSI. So OSI is kind of like the FBI of the Air Force. So if they need anybody to look into any suspicious activity around the base or overseas, terrorist activity, researching where the vulnerabilities might be around a base or a mission, they'll do it. They have an incredibly wide mission and very, very interesting. And fun thing about OSI is they don't actually wear uniforms most of the time because they are in civilian clothing. They don't usually use rank as much, at least day to day when they're addressing each other, they address each other by special agent. They have rank and they are in the military and they are officers, but they have a very unique mission within the Air Force. And then engineering and STEM degrees. So as you might imagine, that's incredibly important in the Air Force because again, so much of what we do revolves completely around our technology that we use. So civil engineering is something that you're going to find on every Air Force base around the world. And that's maintaining the facilities around the base, making sure that anything from architecture to electrical, mechanical, HVAC systems are all working, that kind of stuff. And they keep the base up and running, especially the flight line. So the runways are vital to what we do in the Air Force. So making sure that they are, sound and ready to go is incredibly important. And we have developmental opportunities as well, whether it's research and development, with aeronautical engineering and whatnot, tons of opportunities there too. And as kind of talked about before, we have a medical field. So whether it's physician, nurse, social worker, psychiatrist, that kind of stuff, we all have different specialties within the United States Air Force. If you can imagine it in the civilian medical field, it probably exists in the Air Force. So if you're interested in medical, come talk to us because that's a very unique track within Air Force ROTC. And then finally, the one that you're probably all waiting for are the flying jobs. So your rated career fields, right? So your pilot, your combat systems officers, your air battle managers, and your remote aircraft pilot. And again, these are really the heart of the Air Force. That's our mission, is to fly, fight, and win. So just some options to think about in terms of getting in an aircraft. And if you don't actually want to be a pilot, but you want to be in an aircraft, then look at your combat systems officers. So those are your electronic warfare officers, your weapon systems officers. Air battle management is a different career field. So they fly in the airborne warning and control system jet, AWACS. That's the jet with a big dome on top of it, right? So they are basically flying aircraft controllers in a battle space. So think of, we're fighting an air war. They're up there controlling all of the good guys and letting them know where all the bad guys are. So air battle management, very, very cool. And RPA, which is a remotely piloted aircraft. It's a growing career field, and it's the future of the Air Force, if I'm being honest. I think to some extent we may always have pilots in the cockpit, but there may come a day where everything is remotely piloted. So it's a growing need in the Air Force for sure. Okay, so Air Force commitments. You might be wondering, especially if you're on the fence about trying ROTC, you might be wondering about when are you actually obligated to serve in the Air Force, okay? So you're obligated and you commit to the Air Force once you sign a contract, but you only sign a contract in two instances when it comes to ROTC. Either when you receive a scholarship and you accept the scholarship, or if you're not a scholarship cadet, it doesn't happen until the start of your junior year, your 300 year, when you come back from field training. And you've completed that just fine, and you're ready to enter the professional officer course, or the POC half the course, at that point you would sign a contract. So for those that are not on scholarship, you have 2 years of ROTC where you could walk away at any point as a freshman or sophomore if you're not on scholarship and not owe the Air Force any time or anything. For our high school scholarship folks, if, because you do sign a contract right away, that fall semester of your freshman year, if you decide that the Air Force is not for you or Air Force ROTC is not for you and you don't want the scholarship and you want to walk away, you can do that at any point during your freshman year. So it's essentially a free year of school and you won't owe the Air Force any money back. So it's the freshman self-initiated elimination option is what it's called. And basically that allows you as a scholarship cadet, as a freshman, to say, hey, I tried this out and I don't like it. I don't want to do it anymore. And then you walk away, you don't owe the Air Force any time and you do not owe the Air Force any money. So keep that in mind in case you're on the fence about trying it. Your typical commitment when you do sign your contract, either for your scholarship or to enter the POC course, is 4 years of active duty service. And that will be followed by 4 additional years of inactive reserve service afterwards. So the inactive reserve really is that you are a civilian. You do not report to the military. You do not have anything to do with the military. Once a year, you'll be asked just to make sure that your information is up to date in case anything should happen. But in the inactive reserves, you have nothing to do with the military unless there's a, no kidding, like all-out World War and you get called up. So generally speaking, inactive reserves, not a big deal. So your commitment will change somewhat depending on the career field that you end up being selected for as a POC. So if you end up being a pilot, first off, congratulations. Second off, the 10-year commitment will start after pilot training. And you might be asking yourself, well, why are pilots 10 years and everybody else is 4? Well, that's because pilots spend an average about 18 months to 2 years in training. So training one pilot costs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars due to flight time, time in the simulator, everything like that. So it costs a lot of money to launch a jet for just a training ride. So as a result, that's why we have a 10-year commitment for pilots after you complete your pilot training. Okay, so after you PT. The RPA, SISO, and ABM fields, again, the rest of the rated career fields will have a 6-year commitment after training. And then all the non-rated career fields, I believe the medical, the JAG, the chaplains, everybody like that, will stay at 4 years. So after you graduate from college and you commission, at that point you'll have a 4-year active duty service commitment unless you're a pilot or another rated officer. So pay and benefits. Everybody wants to know what to expect when you go on active duty in terms of compensation, like what kind of money can you make and what kind of life can you live, right? So the nice thing about the Air Force, first off, is that when you graduate, you know what you're going to go do and where you're going to go. So that's always nice. I didn't do ROTC. I actually went off and had a different career after graduation before I decided to change my career and join the military. So I commissioned through officer training school. And I do remember being a senior in college and doing the job application stuff. And it's really kind of nerve-wracking not knowing where you're going to be in a couple of months and what you're going to be doing and where your next paycheck's going to come from, everything like that. Because trust me, folks, when you go to college, you might think that there are employers lined up at your door to hire you once you graduate. That is not the case. So it is nice and it's a weight off your shoulders and it's just so much easier knowing, in this case, if you're an ROTC graduate, that you know where you're going to go, what you're going to be doing for the next 4 years at least, right? So that's pretty handy. Regarding the pay, it's not bad. It's pretty competitive. It's 2 times a month, so every 2 weeks you get paid, right? Get a mid-month paycheck and an end-of-month paycheck. And it depends on what rank you actually are. So I'll explain more of that in a minute. But the more rank you have and the longer that you're in, the more money you get. So you're guaranteed some kind of promotion or some type of pay increase every couple of years, in addition to any raises that that Congress decides to give us. So it's pretty nice. In addition to your base pay, though, you also get some additional stuff as well. So every month you'll get a housing allowance if you live off a base. Now you can live on the base, and most bases work it so that you don't pay any rent of any kind. Most of them have it so that you also don't pay utilities. It just depends from base to base. But you don't have to live on base, which is kind of nice. So as an officer, you get to make that decision of, you know what, I like the surrounding neighborhood, or I want to live over here off base and commute. That's fine. At that point, you would get a housing allowance every month as well. And that housing allowance is based on where you live and how much money the Air Force thinks the average rent is. So living in DC, I got a lot more money than I make here in Kentucky, because the cost of living is higher in DC. Every month you get a food allowance as well. It's about $200, so it's not going to pay for all the food that you're going to eat that month, but it's at least something, and it can definitely help. And if you deploy, you might get additional pay as well, whether it's family separation or hazard pay, anything like that. That would be separate, and that would be dependent on your deployment location. So that's all in addition to your base pay. If you look at that little chart in the bottom right-hand corner, that is an estimate of what you would make as a second lieutenant right off the bat, to include your housing allowance and your food allowance and whatnot. So it's not necessarily exactly what you're going to be making depending on where you're living and what your housing allowance would be and whatnot, but that's kind of an estimate. And you can see that as you promote, you get more money, right? So that total annual pay might look a little bit low, but keep in mind the next thing is that you get free healthcare in the military. So you don't pay any co-pays when you go to the doctor to get a checkup or something is wrong and you get checked out. You pay nothing. You pay nothing. Your dependents, if you have a spouse and kids, you pay nothing. So free healthcare, medications, all that stuff, it doesn't cost you anything. So that can't be understated. Healthcare is incredibly expensive. So even though like you look at your total annual payment might not look that high, you're not spending tens of thousands of dollars potentially on co-pays or other medications, depending what happens, right? So free healthcare, incredibly wonderful part of being in the military. And you also get a retirement plan. And so the way that it works now with all of our new folks that come in is you can choose to have the Air Force contribute to a 401k for you. And depending on your career field, if you get to be about 10 or 12 years into your career and you decide you want to stay and they really need you to stay, they might throw you a bonus on top of that. So, and with the retirement plan at 20 years, you can decide to retire and take that money in different forms, like a lump sum payment or, you know, like a monthly payout. So not a bad deal. And the other really nice thing about being in the military is the fact that you get 30 days of paid vacation every year. So most companies don't do that. Most companies somewhere around the 2-week mark. So this is effectively an entire month that you could take off each year. So, and you can do that depending on your mission, depending on your unit that you're at. You can take a couple of days every month, or you can take off a few weeks, depending on what your boss needs you there to do. But 30 days of paid vacation is pretty sweet. Bonuses like I talked about, if you're, especially on the flying side, if you're a rated officer and they need you to stay in and keep doing your job, they might throw you a bonus to stay in. And then another benefit that's open to everybody are the education benefits. So through tuition assistance, the GI Bill, or the Air Force Institute of Technology, or AFIT, you could pursue a master's degree or even a doctorate's degree. So GI Bill would be available to you after, I believe, 2 years of service. And GI Bill is most effective when you're not on active duty, because it'll pay housing, it'll pay a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't otherwise get to use if you were still in the military. So a lot of people use tuition assistance, and that's basically $4,500 a year toward the next higher degree. So you graduate from your school and from Air Force ROTC with your bachelor's degree. If you wanted to pursue a master's, tuition assistance is widely used and it's really great. Or you can compete for an AFIT slot. So if you get selected to go to AFIT, which is not necessarily that one school, they have AFIT partnerships through many schools around the country. Actually, UK has a program, so we have our AFIT students here at UK, and that's a free master's degree. So it doesn't cost you anything, and it's your full-time job just to go to school and knock out a master's degree, so that's pretty sweet. So just some pay and benefits to expect while you're on active duty. But where can you go? Right, so here are some active duty Air Force locations around the United States. And you can see they're kind of all over the place. So got one up in New England and then all down the East Coast, all throughout the South, kind of the Midwest, very popular, and a few on the West Coast as well as two up in Alaska. There's Elmendorf and Eielson, and Hickam, which is out in Hawaii. So a little outdated. Some of these are now joint bases that we have joint located with the Army. So, but you can see there's so many different options. So I have been at Offutt Air Force Base right there in Nebraska. I've been in DC for the last few years, and I'll show you on the Pacific map where I've been overseas. In Europe, same thing, lots of different locations, many options in England itself. And then on the continent, you have several in Germany, a couple in Italy, in Spain as well. And then down in Turkey of Izmir and Incirlik as well. And the Azores are an island, set of islands to the left of this map. So lots of options in Europe. I generally say if you want to serve overseas, make sure you put your name in and take that option because it is an amazing experience. And I lived, just last year, I was over in Okinawa, Japan. So that's at Kadena Air Base, down there at the bottom of the picture. And yeah, so the culture is amazing out in the Pacific. You can go to South Korea. So most people will do a one-year tour in South Korea, usually when they're 9 or 10 years into their career. I didn't go to South Korea this time. I actually went to Kadena instead for my one-year tour. And a couple different options on the mainland of Japan as well. And then Guam, not in this picture, but just kind of just outside here. So Guam's an amazing location as well. Probably asking yourself, how often would you move in the Air Force? And the simple answer is it just depends on your actual career field. So some will move on average every 3 to 4 years. However, some career fields are smaller and maybe have fewer locations. So not every career field is going to be at every single Air Force base. Some career fields might only be at 3 or 4 bases around the world. So in that case, you're probably not going to move every 3 or 4 years. You might move every 5 to 6, or who knows. Later on in the career, when you are a major or lieutenant colonel, and you do a command tour, those command tours are almost always 2 years long. So a lot shorter, but it's just how it works. And the moves, just so you know, you don't have to pay for your move, okay? So the moves are paid for by the United States Air Force. And you have the option of doing a full service move, so having somebody come out and pack up your house for you and move it and unpack it, unload it and unpack it. So you basically do nothing, you just supervise. That's an option, or if you want to do it yourself, you have that ability to do it yourself as well. Pack it up, you know, rent a truck or whatever yourself and drive it yourself. In that case, you would pay out of pocket, but you would get reimbursed by the government for everything that you expensed on that trip. So that's kind of how moves work. And the same thing with overseas. If you get picked up to go overseas, that's fine, because they'll come up, they'll pack up your house and put on a shipment and send it overseas, and it's going to be okay. So they make it relatively simple. There's some paperwork involved, as you might imagine, but they're used to doing this. They do it every year, multiple times a year. Thousands of people move around every year. So it's a pretty somewhat painless exercise. So life on base. As housing goes, again, you don't have to live on the Air Force Base. Again, that's kind of a nice thing about being an officer, is even if you're brand new, you don't have to live on base. But if you do, here are some of the things that you can enjoy on base. And even if you don't live on base, if you're just there to work and you want to, you know, go shopping or whatever after work, you're more than welcome to enjoy any of the amenities on base, even if you don't actually live there. So housing, every Air Force base has housing on it, and it varies from kind of like condo or apartment style to full up houses with yards and garages. And they have everything and anything in between because they want to cater to a wide variety of people on base. So if you're single, you know, usually they have certain neighborhoods reserved for single folks. Officers, they usually have certain neighborhoods kind of designated for that. Not saying that they keep officers enlisted separate at all. That is not the case, but it just depends on how much you make, you know, your pay scale, and whether or not you have a family. So, but most of the housing, it's getting updated. Most of it's pretty awesome. Some of it's older. It just depends on where you go. So before you move to that base, I would recommend checking out the on-base housing and check out the community outside the base as well and see if maybe there's a better option, you know, within a reasonable commute that you'd prefer. So, but check it all out and make a good decision. So also on base, we have something called the Base Exchange, or the BX. And the BX is basically a mall. So it has everything from clothing to electronics to nutrition stores to a food court, everything. So if you need anything at all, just go to the BX. The commissary is there as well. And the commissary is a fancy word for grocery store. And cool thing about the Base Exchange and the commissary is that it's tax-free. So if you care about saving a little bit of money, that's, you know, not a bad bet. The base library usually has a lot of great services like video rental, or, you know, if you're in an education program, it's a great place to go. If you have a family or you're looking to start a family, there are always childcare services on an Air Force base through the childcare center. So they have youth programs, teen programs, everything for everybody. And they usually have different types of restaurants, whether it's fast food. Usually I think Burger King is the typical one on an Air Force base, but there are others as well. And as well as sit-down dining through, you know, different clubs or other restaurants that are allowed to be on base. They have post offices, banks, again, your education centers. Some colleges on some of the bigger Air Force bases actually have in-person classes. So that's pretty cool. Where if you want to knock out your master's degree, you don't have to do the entire thing online. If you prefer going in person, they might have some classes every, you know, once a week or so that you can enroll in. And if you have a spouse, if you need help getting your spouse a job or any kind of support services, like if you get deployed, they have them on the base. They have a spouse network to make sure that, you know, new spouses kind of understand how life on an Air Force base actually works and help take care of them. So it's really a community is the best way I can describe it. Of course, they have fire, police, EMS, hospitals. The Air Force has its own hotel chain with Air Force lodging, and youth sports leagues. So if you end up having a family and you want to get the kids involved with sports or different types of activities, they have all those activities on base. So when I say it's a community, I really mean it. So it's its own, it's kind of like a town, honestly. It's like a little fenced-in town surrounding a flight line. So kind of some shots of what life on base kind of looks like. That top left-hand corner is an aerial photo of, I believe it's Randolph, I'm not sure. But Randolph is a base down in Texas. And you see kind of the runway toward the bottom of that photo, and then some of the housing and that kind of spoked wheel in the middle there, surrounded by offices and, you know, housing and everything like that. So pretty cool, little self-contained community. The top right corner is the Base Exchange, the mall that I was talking about. And then that's just a photo of one of the base housing units that you might find on a base. They can actually be really pretty nice. And a lot of it is getting new and upgraded. So you're finding more and more new units on bases. So like I said, check it out and see if it's something that you'd want to, you know, live in while you're there. Can be pretty handy to not have rent for the first couple of years. We have gyms and fitness centers on base, and a lot of them are pretty awesome. Check out. Like I said, clubs and restaurants to hang out in, and if you're lucky, I think that's from Kadena in Japan, I think that's their roving ice cream truck, and everybody loves an ice cream truck. So like I said, community feel. The base works very hard to promote community and to make sure that people are aware of different activities that are going on, different events that are going on. If there's a concert, you know, if there's a youth activity, something like that, they will make sure that everybody is aware of it so you can choose to participate or not. But feeling included on an Air Force base is very, very easy. And then something that's near and dear to my heart as a force support officer is the recreation. So we take recreation very seriously because making sure people have an outlet, right? Because some of our jobs are very, very serious, and we want to make sure that people are relaxed and ready to go and focused. And one way to help them do that is to make sure they have some, you know, some time to enjoy what they, you know, whatever their passion is, right? So if you're looking for stuff on base to do, stop over at the Force Support Squadron or the FSS, and they have so many activities I couldn't even list them all. Here's just a short list of what you might find there. In their morale, welfare, and recreation, or MWR section. Auto hobby shops, so if you're a gearhead and you love working on your car or your truck, a lot of bases have auto hobby shops where you can actually use the lifts and stuff for a pretty low fee, and tools and everything like that. And they do classes, so if you're not a gearhead and you don't know what's going on with your car, but you want to get smarter on it, they'll usually have different types of classes where you can learn to change your oil or learn to change a tire, that kind of stuff. Outdoor recreation is kind of like a blanket term for everything. So they do hiking trips, they do whitewater rafting trips, skydiving. They do like RV rental. If you want to book an RV and go out on a road trip, you can do that. So outdoor recreation, camping is huge. So, and they also have like an equipment rental that you can rent that kind of gear for and go out hiking or whatever. Lots to do under outdoor rec. I couldn't even talk about it, all of it right now. So go check them out when you get to your base. Golf courses are a pretty standard thing on Air Force Base. And so some of them are actually really excellent. So if you're a golfer or you want to get involved in golf, an Air Force Base is an excellent place to do that. Tickets and Tours is an office that specializes in getting you know, tickets to local events. So if there's a local arena or pro sports team or college sports team that you want to get tickets to, they usually have discount tickets through that office. As well as if you want to book a trip somewhere, they can usually help you with that too. So like in Kadena in Okinawa, Japan, they would do pretty regular trips to Sydney, Australia, and South Korea, and mainland Japan. So pretty cool. If you want to go check those areas out, you could do it through that organization, and they have a tour guide with you, so everybody's good to go. We have parks on the base. If you're into sports and you want to play on a team, we have intramural sports on base, whether it's softball, baseball, basketball, or kind of the big three, but we have other things as well. Pools, fitness centers and gyms, aero clubs. Not every base is going to have an aero club. But that's basically, it's a flying club, right? So they'll have flight school if you want to get your private pilot's license and you don't have it yet. You can do that for, again, usually cheaper than what you would find it on the outside. So civilian school and civilian flight rental is usually a little bit more expensive than the Air Force aero clubs. And again, marinas, if you're in a base that's close to a coastline, you might have a marina to rent a boat. Bowling, arts and crafts, and more. That's just a very short list. And like I said, not every Air Force base is going to have all of those things, but check them out, and you'll find that there's a lot to do. If you're bored on an Air Force base, you're trying to be bored. So the last thing today that we're going to talk about is what career and promotion kind of looks like once you're on active duty. So once you have completed your service obligation, okay, so you're 4 years, right? Or if you're a pilot, you're 10 years. You can choose to either separate from the Air Force and get out of the military and go back to a civilian career, or you can choose to stay. So unlike enlisted folks, officers don't re-enlist because we have a commission. We can choose to, again, separate once it's time, or just retain the commission and keep serving. So there's no contract you have to renew every 4 or 6 years. You just keep serving. If you don't want to stay for the full 20, but you do want to keep serving in some way, you can actually transfer to the Air Force Reserves or the Air National Guard. And the cool thing about the Reserves or the Guard is that you have the option to do part-time service and, you know, have a civilian career, do the civilian thing, but then, you know, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, you put on the uniform again and you go and you work with your unit. There are full-time positions within the Reserves and the Guard, but those are a little bit more rare. But again, so some flexibility. So if you want to do, say, your 4 years on active duty and then come back and do a civilian gig, but you still want to serve and do your time, you can say, okay, I'm going to get out of active duty and then just transfer to the Reserves or the Air National Guard, depending on what unit you prefer. So some flexibility there. And it's good because I think it allows you to pursue whatever it is your passion is. So again, if you want that civilian career, you can do that too. So promotion on the active duty side, relatively standard. So your first 2 years as a second lieutenant is where you commission as, right? Second lieutenant. 2 years after that, you automatically promote to first lieutenant. Okay, so now you're an O2. And then 2 years after that, to the day, you automatically promote to captain. So it's 4 years from when you commission until when you put on captain. And then roughly about 5 years from that, you'll meet a selection board. So major right now is the first rank where you have to really compete for it. And selection boards will review your whole record with all of your different performance reports from each year and your recommendations from your supervisors and everything like that in your chain of command as to whether or not you should promote now or wait, depending on how you're doing. So again, that's typically 5 years from captain to major. You're a captain for a pretty long time. And then major to lieutenant colonel, it will vary. So lieutenant colonel will allow you to actually promote ahead of schedule if you're really awesome. But again, it's probably another 4 to 5 years on average to get to lieutenant colonel. And then from lieutenant colonel to colonel, again, it varies. So you have, again, another opportunity to promote early to colonel, but you have to be pretty awesome to do that too. So again, like the first 4 years of your career, very automatic and planned out. 2 years to first lieutenant, 2 more years of captain, and then 5 or so years you'll put on major. All right, but you have to compete for major for the first time. That might change by the time you guys get to the point where you are on active duty. They might say, okay, we're gonna have a selection board for captain. They've done that in the past. I don't know if they'll ever bring it back because there wasn't a huge success, but it is a possibility. So that's why when you get on active duty, you really want to hit the ground running and do great work and focus really hard on what your job is and learning your job. So, because the better you know your job, the better you perform, the better you look for promotion. Promotion is not based on where you commission from. So I had somebody ask me last year, well, if I went to the academy, wouldn't I promote faster? And the answer is no, you would not. So again, it's automatic for everybody, you know, 2 years, and then to captain, that's automatic. That does not change because you went to the academy. And it doesn't get you any favors to promote to major either. What they care about is not where you came from, but where you are going. So they are going to look at your performance as an officer and decide, you know, do you have the potential to serve in the next grade up and go from there. So hopefully that made it a little bit more clear and you understand, you know, a little bit more about what Air Force careers look like and have an idea of what you might be getting yourself into with Air Force AFROTC. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this entire course has been useful. Again, well, if you're at this video, you've probably completed all the other videos, but just make sure you complete all the videos before the first day, before you come to the new student orientation on, I believe it's 13 August right now. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to your cadet mentor and ask them the questions as well. But yeah, I hope you enjoy your summer and we can't wait to see you in the fall. I know it's going to be challenging with the COVID restrictions, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to get through it, and we're going to be better for it. So again, I hope you've enjoyed the series. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if you have questions, please ask. There is no stupid question anywhere. It's better to know the information than to, guess. So definitely ask if you have any questions, and I will see you hopefully in the fall. All right, thanks everybody. Take care, and thank you.